All right, Coach Lee here. It's time once again to start doing FTP tests, the dreaded FTP test. This is crucial to your base period. Many of us got off track doing FTP tests, maybe because of our summer racing, cyclocross season. We really don't need to do an FTP test in the middle of a season. So many people have gotten off track with their FTP tests, but in this base period, it's time once again to start nailing the FTP tests, to start making sure that our zones are dialed in so that we're getting the maximum physiological benefit. Now, FTP, it's never an easy test. There's a lot of physicality to it, but there's a lot of the mental game that goes with it as well. So my athletes are all doing their FTP test, and a lot of them are, they're upset that it wasn't as what it was in the fall. I always do a period of detraining between the fall and the new base period. Just let your body absorb that stress, let your body relax, let your body just recover. And so your FTP is not what it was usually in the fall or the summer, or even maybe your spring high. So every year, personally, my FTP is the highest in the spring because it's so hot here in the mountains of Virginia, I cannot do the work necessary to sustain a high FTP all summer long. It's just too hot. I can't do the work. So my FTP coming out of winter, coming out of spring is at its all highest, and then I just maintain it or watch it drop throughout the year. FTP is not this linear progression where it just every month it just keeps going up and up and up. FTP changes. FTP changes throughout the year. It goes up depending on what you're doing in the season. My cyclocross racers right now, their FTPs are dropping because it's just not the type of work that they're doing for the cyclocross season. They're not doing dedicated threshold work. If you want a high FTP, you have to be doing dedicated threshold work. That's very important. If you want the highest FTP you ever had, you have to be doing that threshold work. And so it goes up and down. It goes up and down through the year. It goes up and down through the week. Your FTP could go up and down through the day. Like you could have a banging FTP test in the morning, but for whatever, you'd feel bad in the afternoon and you'd never be able to replicate that in the afternoon. So your FTP is it's always going up all the time. And the other day I went out to do my FTP test and someone asked me, or they sent me a text. An amazing individual sent me a text saying, hey, I wish you the sweetest of rewards for your FTP test. So I did my FTP test and I had another 3 hours. I added another couple hours to the test. It was a beautiful day. And I kept, for that 3 hours, I thought of one single question. What is the sweet reward of an FTP test? Now, I have several different ideas on this subject, and let's break them down. The first of all is that we want an accurate functional number, meaning a number we can hit pretty much of the day, of the week, not a one-off. And to really understand this concept, we have to understand what the F in FTP is. All of this is to answer the question, what is the sweet reward for an FTP test? The F in FTP is functional. Functional means something that you can do day in and day out. The goal of an FTP test is not this quest for vanity. It's not this quest to pump your chest and beat your chest and tell everybody what your new high FTP is. The goal of an FTP test is that functional number, meaning a number that you can hit each and every day. FTP is important. It's a metric, but remember, it's only one metric. I train myself. I work with athletes that we look at numerous metrics throughout the training season, especially towards their event specificity. What are those key metrics for their events? What are the key metrics to this time of the year or this time of the year? The key metrics will often change. They will flow. FTP is an extremely important metric, but it's only one metric. And what do we want? We want that functional number. So first off, I always recommend do the 20-minute test with the 5-minute blowout, okay? So this is the standard Andy Coggan FTP test with this 5-minute blowout. It's 20 minutes long. Do the blowout. The blowout takes care of your anaerobic capacity, right? So we don't want the FTP is to measure what you can do at threshold, right? So somewhere between 50 and 65, 75 minutes, we want to know what you can do aerobically. We don't want you sprinting in there. We don't want you out of the saddle. We just want your best aerobic effort. So Andy Coggan just did this test. He created this test and did an amazing job. And it stands true to this day that this is a great way to set your zones. If you can't do this, then go out and do a 1-hour TT. See how you do. Okay. The next thing is don't train for the exam. Oh, one more thing. You know, there's a ramp test. So Zwift, Trainer Road, they do a ramp test. And so the ramp test is just, you just keep ramping up your watts until you fail. Like, you do these watts for 1 minute, go up 1 minute, go up 1 minute until you fail. The problem with the ramp test, and I've done many ramp tests, is that you can gin that thing to make your watts, your FTP, much higher than what it actually is, because you're allowed to use both your aerobic and anaerobic capacity for that exam. You will actually get an FTP that's, 15, 20 watts higher than what it actually should. Now, the most important thing that we want to do with this FTP is dial in your zones so that when you're training in the endurance zone and there's certain physiological adaptations that we want to accrue during that time in zone, that you are in actual endurance zone and not doing tempo. So if you have this ginned up high FTP, what's the problem? You're doing tempo work when you're supposed to be doing endurance work. Zone 2 training is very important. Zone 3 training is very important. All the zones have specific physiological adaptations associated with them, and we need to dial in those zones. So what do we got next? All right. Don't train for the exam. This is the most important thing. In order to get a good functional number, you don't want to train for the exam. And I'm the big violator of this one. So for so many years, I just wanted a high FTP, high FTP, high FTP, high FTP. And so I can just go out and just do 20-minute intervals all the time. And boom, I can just gin up my FTP by doing all my work centered around 20-minute intervals. The problem is, what do I like to do? What type of race do I like? I like to race centuries. So just ginning up a 20-minute number so that I can have a big FTP number does not translate to a 6-hour or 5-hour rocking it out Grand Fondo, rocking it out for a race. Like, that's my favorite type of racing. And so we don't want to train for the exam. Only use aids and supplements that you would use every workout. So this is very important for me because I used to it's FTP day. I'm going to get the biggest number that I can. I'm going to freaking do all out tons of beats. I'm going to do tons of caffeine. I'm going to, smother my legs and amp. Well, the problem is that that's not how I train each and every day. And so basically, if you go out there with a number of supplements, a number of aids to get the biggest number possible for your FTP, what are you doing? You're ginning up that number and you're not getting an actual functional number. I don't use all those aids every workout that I go into. So only use the aids, only use the supplements that you use every workout, day in and day out. Remember, we want a functional number. We're not trying to get a high number. We're not trying to get a low number. We're trying to get an accurate number. And that's the most important thing. Always remember that. Don't ignore the data. So this last one is very important. So I'll have athletes and I'll say, okay, here's your FTP. And especially if they're new to me, then, I'll go in and I'll change their FTP and they might go back and change it back to what it was because of the drop. Okay. So say their FTP is 300 normally in high season, and then they do a test coming out of a detraining period and it's only 285, 290. Well, they might just leave it at 300 in Strava or in their Zwift or their Garmin or something like that, but that's not what we want. Remember, the sweet reward for an FTP test, that thing that we want is the F in FTP. We want a functional number. So when I go out and did my test, how did I do? I did terrible. So I started out too strong right here, and I just died 1,000 deaths to get to the end. So this is the exact opposite way that I like to do an FTP test. For me to get my best numbers, I need to start low and do negative splits all the way up. I have another video on negative splitting intervals. Please watch that video. But for me to get the best number, I need to start down here and go up. But this is the first FTP test of the year. I went back, I looked at my history, and I got it pretty close. It was like I did an estimate. I lowered that a little bit, but I was still a little hard going out, and I was chasing a bigger number than what I actually had in me. All right, so what do we got? Let's do, we want an accurate functional number. Do the 20-minute test. Don't train for the exam. Use only aids and supplements that you use every day. Don't ignore the data. That is the F in FTP. That is the sweet reward for a FTP test. It's that functional number, that number that you can use day in and day out. And I have repeated myself 1,000 times in this video because, I'm banging my head on the wall with talking about FTP because it's been marketed in such a way, going all the way back, to the early 2000s, that it's been marketed in such a way and talked about such a way with a lot of coaches, like this is the single metric, this is the single number, this is the holy grail. If we just get this number, then everything is awesome. Well, that's not the case at all. I work with my athletes on a number of metrics. FTP is one. And so when you get done with the day, when you get done with that FTP test and you say, yeah, this isn't a one-off, this is an accurate number of where I am right now, that is the sweet reward of an FTP test. And that's the mental mindset that you have to get when doing FTP tests. All right. Hey, you want to talk coaching? Lee at pro13.com, www.pro13.com. Reach out to me. Would love to talk to you about coaching. Would love to talk to you about FTP tests. Would love to look at your data. Talking's free. Reach out today. Take care, everybody.